Hello, and welcome to the Bot Nirvana podcast, where we dive into all things software automation. I'm your host, Nandan Mullakra. While I'm not podcasting, I write articles on nandan.info. I hope you enjoyed the show. Let's get right into it. Today we have Avinash Misra. Avinash is the co-founder and CEO of Skan AI, which is an AI-powered process intelligence platform. They're building a platform that can help you understand what they're calling as the telemetry of work. Using AI, they observe day-to-day tasks being performed across your organization to build a data-driven meta model of work that can enable informed decisions. In this chat, we discuss about Skan AI and how they're building this meta model of work that could be a revolutionary first step in improving the way we work. Let's listen in. Hi, Avinash. Welcome to the Bot Nirvana podcast. Thanks for spending time with us today. Can we start off by a quick intro about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Avinash, and as histories of people go, few people have the distinct advantage and disadvantage of having only one thing on their resume: CEO and co-founder. And for the last 20 years, I have been just CEO and co-founder. No natural progression, no growth, nothing. I've been a lifelong entrepreneur. This is my second large venture. My first venture was acquired in 2015 by a very large BPM company. And historically, I have been very focused on the digital transformation space. All my work on the entrepreneurial side has been built around opportunities of new technology that opens up new possibilities from a digital perspective. My first company was built all around the front office transformation using enterprise mobility as the weapon of choice, and enterprise mobility being the diamond-headed drilling bit into enterprise strategy in the time period from 2007 right up to 2015. And then as this whole focus from front office transformation gave way to middle office and back office transformation, my second company is now based in solving the problems in the middle and back office with the latest advancements in AI and computer vision. But we'll talk more about what we are doing as we go along. But that's a brief introduction. I live in Dallas, Texas. Of course, born and brought up in India. And as the joke goes, how do you tell a person who's been to IIT? You don't. You wait for them to tell you about it. So I belong to that category of people who went to the IIT in India. But that's a long time ago. And now I define myself as a lifelong entrepreneur and a learner of technology.
Great. A history of being at the top and then following the opportunities, right? As you see it come.
Correct.
So you've been working on the middle office and the back office. So it looks like you've been working on Skan for some time. I think you started off in stealth and then moved along, right? Can you tell us a bit about Skan?
I think again, all companies are founded in the missteps or the pain points or the challenges of their founders. And it so happened that my co-founder, Manish Garg, by the way, also my classmate from IIT. So I've worked with him for the last 25 years now, and the co-founder of my last company as well. Both of us, after having sold our last venture to Genpact, we found ourselves as an integral part of what was coming up as the new digital stack as Genpact Digital, right? So things around computational linguistics, chatbots, and natural language processing, and OCR, and bots, and so on and so forth. This new ecosystem was having an impact on essentially what was eyes on screen, fingers on keyboard kind of business processes, right? Either in-house or outsourced, so retained operations or external operations, right? And we were charged in bringing these digital interventions into these business processes. And the fact is that there are whip marks on our backs for all the times that we tried to take a business process and say, all right, we will convert it into lights out digital. Or if not lights out digital, we'll extract certain efficiencies out of it because we'll bring in natural language, OCR, and those kinds of things. One enduring lesson, like across the board, is that while we are all focused on our choice of the best OCR engine, best chatbot technologies, best RPA, and so on and so forth, that fidelity of that choice versus the fidelity of understanding of what is it that you're trying to transform is chalk and cheese. Because you may have the best choices on the tooling and the technology side, but if you do not have fundamental measures and understanding of that which you're trying to transform, you're forever doomed in a cycle of repeatedly putting band-aid upon band-aid upon band-aid. So that realization came to us that, hey, if we're going to use bots or if you're going to put in natural language, we must first understand the nuances, exceptions, and permutations on the upstream business side and look at how business runs before we make these interventions. Otherwise, you're beginning from a source of truth that is not really the source of truth, but that is only an accepted compromise of truth, right? And so that was the starting point of this company, saying that how can we create measures and a meta model of work itself. And I'll go as we talk along to go into more why we call it the meta model of work. Indeed, the deeper question being what is work itself, right? So that's where a company was born. That can you measure wherever there is a large diversity in the landscape of the application, greater diversity in the kind of people involved in that business process, and diversity in upstream and downstream business conditions. Can you manage to be able to build a meta model, a data driven description of the work that is happening in these organizations? That was the driving point or the starting point of this company.
Wow, that's very interesting. And that's very important, right, that we start with the truth, right? Because I've done multiple automation myself, and one of the key problems that we always found is the process complexity, or the processes or the things that people have in their head is not what's actually out there. So we don't really know the truth till we actually look at it, right? So, and that's great. And so I continue. What I think you call it the telemetry of work, right? So what do you mean by that, and what do you do?
I'll certainly talk about that, but I think you stuck on an even more deeper point, which is the fundamental thing here. You see, when human beings work, right, and not just work on the digital side of the world, even in the non-digital side of the world, I'll say, Nandan, how do you drive a car, right? There's a certain level of abstraction until which you will stop. Beyond that abstraction, you cannot go. For example, you're never going to say to me, hey, Avinash, this is the way I drive a car. There's a part of my brain which is dedicated to autonomic impulses, wherein if a red light, I see a red light or a child on the street, without even thinking, my motor neurons will fire and my leg will go up and hit the brake pedal, even before I understand what's going on. That is not something you will describe. Yet you will do it every single time. The point being, that when something moves from the prefrontal cortex to the reptilian brain, that is when it becomes habit, it is almost impossible to describe. In business processes, as much as there is conscious thought of doing certain things, at scale, there is a lot of unconscious behavior also that is set in, which you can never discover by asking people. And when you ask them, they don't tell you what they do, they tell you what they're supposed to be doing. Right. So these two things, by the way, there's a whole thesis behind this. It's called Polanyi's paradox. So a British Hungarian philosopher in the 60s, he's a mathematical computer theorist. And he used to say that fundamentally AI is impossible because people know more than they can tell. What he didn't contend with the fact that people know more than they can tell, but certainly you can observe those people and learn from them. So there is that aspect of this whole thesis as well. And coming to what we are learning from this entire thing is that mine and Manisha's big insight was that if you expend energy in trying to find out what is quote unquote work, then and if you happen to ask people what they're doing, or if you try to read from standard operating procedures, what you get is a shadow of work, right? You don't get the true nuance. And the reason you don't get the true nuance is because first of all, work is not static. So you know how it is when business systems, and you've been there in their career, right? When you put a business system in place, there is a business intent that is very close to that business system, and then you let it go. Within a very short period of time, the business intent evolves and the business system stays behind. Sometimes the business system evolves, the intent follows it. Essentially, the problem is that the forces that are driving the evolution of business systems and the forces that are driving the evolution of the trajectory of the business intent, they are not coupled. They are driven by entirely different forces with their own criteria, with their own challenges. As a result, it is not at all surprising that inside organizations, there is always a gap between what they think is their business process and the real business process on the ground. It is inbuilt. It is not because of any indiscipline or anything like that. It is the very nature of the beast itself. So when Manish and I said that if that is the case, right, that there will always be a gap, then doesn't this represent an opportunity for us to close that gap and solve in such a manner so that you have more robust digital transformation, more control at an operational level on those business processes, right? That's when we decided that where is the source of truth, right? The source of truth is the person working, right? And where does that person work? That is where the digital rubber hits the digital road, which is on the screen. Now, of course, you can go into the details as to why the screens and what is the advantage of being on the screen. And I'll mention a few of them to you. You see, many people argue, well, the work is being done and it's being recorded somewhere in the back end. So you should be able to query at a data level the backend systems and backend logs and so on and so forth. You should be able to get a fair sense of work. The challenge is, that most backend systems, almost 99.99% of the backend systems that we have, are essentially records of committed states of work, not of work itself. There is no streaming record of work. There is a committed state from one to the other. And so even if you had systems that were recording work, you get a granularity in time that invoice at state A and at point T equal to T1, T equal to 0, invoice at state A, T equal to T2, it is at state B. But what is happening between those states is not recorded, right? Because the person wrote an email to someone, got a response, did some calculations, screen. And now we were triggered by the fact that, well, our bots were failing and so on and so forth. So we thought that if we build this better meta model of work by watching work on the screen, we'll be able to build out a fantastic way to automate. What we realized later, that which we are building, this observable telemetry of work, right, is far more meaningful than just automation.
Yeah, that was very interesting. Yeah, you're creating this whole data model for work itself, and it's a new kind of data that you're building, which is, I think, very valuable in terms of not just. I think what you're saying is not just doing, a point of time view, but a continuous view of how the process is evolving and changing and improve, and we can use that to improve the work, right? And that can be by automation, and probably automation comes last. Maybe you should look to optimize it. Maybe you look to even eliminate things out there, and then probably automate if required, right? So now, with respect to this data model itself, I was going to ask you about process mining, but then you mentioned process mining and how it is, and that was a great explanation of why process mining doesn't give you a complete view. But from a data model perspective, do you think there is some data out there in those logs and databases which can be
There is a
included
lot.
in
There is a
telemetry?
lot of data. There is a lot of data in those process logs.
Okay,
But we must also recognize that what is the effort required to bring together that data.
true.
And I have personally been involved in projects where the effort to bring together that data, and you can do it once, but to set up continuous connections into those systems to bring that data continuously is extremely high. Whereas if you look at our approach, which is go from the front end, right, and almost generate a better quality of data with far lesser constraints, it doesn't matter to us. It's a green screen. It's a modern web application. I have customers who, as part of their process, they have half the screen, which is telex a green screen terminal, right? Xterm. And on the left hand side is the most modern web app that you could think of. It's almost like archaeology versus spaceship. And the funny thing is that in this process, these people are using both these sources of information to put together a certain process that happens, right? And so we are not saying that give us access to this API, that system, and give me that data, then I'll be able to tell you things. It's based on what people are doing. And more than that, what people are doing, backend will never tell us all the hidden nuances of how people are going about doing things.
One of the stories of recent has been the UI elements, right? Because discovering the value in the data in interacting through UI elements. So RPA is interacting through UI, and it's mostly, it's mostly looked down upon by many techies as it's a band-aid, it's a way to do things, but it's one way to do thing, right? And it has its downsides, but it has its upsides too, and that's why people are using it. And what you are talking about, just looking at the UI side, you can actually look at the whole complete work, rather than just look at the back end and try and dig those process mining or dig those databases, which I also have an experience. Getting the data in such cases is so difficult, right?
So difficult.
And so you've discovered that value, and we are seeing that UI is like making, it's not a comeback. UI is actually becoming more and more precious than we thought earlier, at least, right?
Human digital interactions have a certain value in terms of time and motion, right? Time and motion equivalent on the digital screen. How much time do I spend on this screen versus that screen, and so on and so forth. In that sense, that is, in some sense, that is the understanding of the process, right? But what is even deeper and meta here is that you can look at what is the data inside those screens and begin to construct a sense of how data itself is flowing and is used under different cases. So the fact that you see that a particular invoice amount, when greater than 200,000, goes through another path versus lesser than 200,000 goes through another path, is knowledge that is coming from data, right? Inherent in those screens. Now, you could have said that 20% of my cases go through this way, 80% go this way, but why? Right? That's because of the data that is present there that you can draw inferences from. This is powerful information. Why? Because this also now gives you extremely powerful ways in monitoring conformance on those processes. So the mistakes that humans make, you can catch those anomalies very easily, right? Or people do or do not do those things. We all know, right, that banks, insurance companies, and so on and so forth have so much to gain or lose by doing the right things or not doing the right things, right? And in doing those things, how can we augment humans in saying, hey, pointing out things that, hey, we didn't do this, or at least a day end report saying that 6% of the population missed doing these steps, and so on and so forth. So it's like an augmentation of supervisory itself, right? Using AI. You can't have a supervisor on every desk, so you have AI to help you create an aggregate view, as well as being able to drill down back into data and see what's going on. So yes, you are absolutely right that UI in some sense is orange is the new black kind of thing. It is now back in the forefront of what we are trying to do. And yes, you're also right that historically for 20 years we had given a lot of precedence to solving things the right way in the back end. And now we are saying, all right, while that will take its own course, there is an easier fix here of doing it in the front end. And what we are saying is not just that it is an easy fix, but fundamentally you can take out more insights from that are hidden here about human digital interactions that you could not fundamentally get from the back end.
Yeah, and more happening in the front end too, right?
More happening in the front end too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I think that also brings up another point, and this has been a question from people who we have been talking about the whole UI desktop mining part of things, right? Is about the privacy. And especially in Europe, I hear a lot of these issues in terms of privacy for people. I'm sure you covered that. But, you know, that, that's one aspect to think about. And I think a bigger aspect is also the human element, right? I mean, in the sense that yes, there is a right way to do it, and then there is also taking some flexibility of human elements to consider, right? Like people want to do certain things in a certain way, while the machine may straitjacket you into doing it in a certain way. So how do you see that, and how do we make it like a good balance where we take care of the human elements, ensure there's privacy, and also do this complete data model?
So allow me to answer the first question on privacy. I think we have uh, by design and by some amount of luck, uh, uh, our first set of customers were all insurance companies, banks, financial services organizations. So by their very nature, we were forced to architect our solution, which takes into account one, uh, agent or operator privacy in mind, and B, the privacy and the security that comes inherent because there is PII data on the screens, right? So for both those, we have solved from day one. One of our biggest strengths, one of the reasons why we are seeing so much success of Skan in the banking, financial services, insurance sector, is because we have a mechanism which is privacy preserving, which does not infringe on parts of the work that person may be doing at a private level. So, for example, I'm doing my work and I opened up, let us say, my Amazon shopping, whatever, and start doing that. Then will that be captured? Or I open up my health records, will that be captured? So we have mechanisms for process owners to be able to say upfront what is whitelisted, what is not whitelisted, kind of thing. And the second aspect is that even in the whitelisted applications that we have mechanisms to redact sensitive information from the screens before they're captured, right? So there is a very powerful mechanism at play to prevent unintended capture of personal work outside of the official work that the person is doing on a desktop, and also within the set of applications that relate to work. If there is PII, then we are able to redact that. And on top of all this, we have a very clever mechanism of making sure that private enterprise data, business data, stays with the enterprise, and it does not come to our cloud. Right? So those are some of the things that we have put into place, and our customers are really appreciate the fact, and there's a reason that they are choosing to work with us, because we give them complete 100% ironclad guarantee that this data belongs to you, it will remain with you. We are not taking that data. Right. So there's while we are a cloud-based solution, there's an intelligent use of a hybrid mechanism in which data resides at a certain location owned by the customer, and it's no different from the privacy preserving mechanisms that Apple uses, by the way, in getting data from your device, de-identifying your device, and using only the metadata to understand what's happening on this board. So that's one part of the question. Second part of the question is about nuance, right? And so it's a great question. So example, and we have worked a lot. In fact, our head of data science, Dr. J.C. Bose. Dr. J.C. Bose is the PhD student of Dr. Will Wander Alst, who was now known as the father of process science, if one has to give him a name. So his PhD student, and he has published 50, 60 papers in the field of understanding human work based on digital inputs, right? And one of the bigger challenges in all of this is that as people work, it's not just something special that they might do, but even as they work, there might be any kind of noise, right? A person may toggle between two screens. A person may show a burst of work and then slow down. So what are these? What is the human intent behind doing these things? A person may look at a certain document, then come back here. What is the intent of looking at that document? Can you find a correlation? There might be situations where you as the algorithm needs to predict whether this is a new path of work being born because of upstream business conditions changing, or it is just a deviation from that path. And this is because you will look at data across a number of people. Did all people react in that way? Did only a few? Is this a local variation? Is this a global variation, right? So there is part of our work that is very, very tightly coupled to understanding or constructing structured data from unstructured screen information across the thing. That is one part. And the second larger part of our work is to reduce noise from this work. Understand what is noise, understand the deviations, understand bursts of work, understand nuances and permutations of this work. So there is that second part. And I think a lot of the world is focused on, hey, this is a cool idea. You can look at screen and understand work. Actually, that is the easier part of this whole equation. The harder part is that when you have multiple structured time series of events that have happened on individual desktop, to be able to piece them together and then be able to predict that these are the cyclicities, these are the events, these are the activities built on those events, and how hierarchically you can build the process. That is the harder part of this work.
So you're focused on the work aspect of it, right? So now that you're looking at it from an aspect of work, so how do you see this evolving from a work perspective, from a futuristic perspective with this new data? How would work evolve? How do you think the work?
I think that's the mother of all questions. So let me try and give an answer to this question by way of examples. And at the end of those examples, maybe we'll have a more meta answer to your question as to where is work going. So take our example of a customer who has about close to 500 people on a given business process. And we built out the process graph in terms of time spent on various applications. What are people doing there? What are the deviations, exceptions, nuances, all of those things. So they're taking this process graph, taking our data, and intersecting with their Workday database, HR Workday database, right? And you might think that, well, they're intersecting this because they want to see under a certain manager, are there more efficiencies? Under a certain group of people, is there more efficiencies? And so on and so forth, because you have group information there, right? Actually, that's not the case. The real reason why they want to do so is because they have cost data, cost of work in the HR database. Now they're intersecting that to be able to generate this new cost of work information. That if my process moves from state A to state B, what are the things that influence cost? So a few months before we had come into the picture, this customer had dropped $1.5 million with a very well named consulting organization $1.5 million and 6 months of work to answer that question, saying that what are the more main levers of cost in this business process, and interviews and so on and so forth. But guess what? That answer was still a snapshot in time. It was not a continuous answer. If they made a change, then they have to measure all over again. Whereas with our kind of technology, they are now able to make those changes, and they're able to see, well, in my process, the cost of correspondence is higher. Correspondence can happen in 10 different ways, right? But these are the heads under which my cost goes. If I can limit this, then I can bring down the cost of my the cycle time, the touch time, the handling time. And we're giving all of these things. How much is the cycle time? How much is the handle time? How much is touch time? So all in all, a long-winded way of saying that there are many hidden aspects of work, which at scale, if you're able to see, you will be able to control those aspects of work in a much more finer and a granular way. That's one example. There are other examples of work too, wherein customers have used our tooling to understand where are people spending maximum time on, and can that time be optimized by change of tooling. Or look at various forms of data that they're using. Can we bring all those data into one screen so that they, instead of going through 10 screens, they can do it all on one screen? This is not to do with RPA. You might put RPA on top of that too, but just some very basic changes that lead to a huge amount of efficiencies because of the number of people involved. Then also the intersection of at the intersection of the tool and the individual, where are there inefficiencies? So in fact, one customer of ours actually has gotten us to build a filter on top of our data, which allows them to look at all those parts of work where one set of people is breezing through, but yet there is another set of people that is spending a lot more time on that screen. And what is the reason why? Are these new people? Is there something wrong with the upstream business condition, or what is it? So these are the outliers that we are bringing in, which humans can only watch one screen, but we can watch hundreds of screens and give you that aggregate information. Somewhere along these lines, this whole telemetry of work that we are generating is the future of work. In the sense that we are able to now tell you exactly what is happening between man and machine at scale, something that you only knew what the machine was doing. Now we're saying in between man and machine. And on that basis, be able to build out this whole, I would say, augmented supervisory of work, or a operational intelligence in a way that was never possible. Why? Because that intelligence historically was based on anecdotal data. We're bringing a data model into that thing. So some of the things that a future of work will be predicated on will be this kind of telemetry, the observability that this kind of telemetry creates. And as humans move from seeding some of the work that they do to bots, and this emergent mosaic of bots and humans put together, where humans are doing more high-level function, nonetheless, they are doing some function, to be able to look at all the interplays and the interaction between that based on data. That's where the future of work is. And on top of that, people will come up with various forms of interventions. Our role is to be the fundamental data model for that future of work.
Now, just staying with work and probably looking at some softer aspects. This was a question. Yesterday, I was on another podcast where I was being interviewed, and they did ask this question about people now are jittery about what's happening in this whole space, right? With all this data that we are generating, and it already data that's generated, we are looking at a future where things would be more productive, things will be more efficient, and then a lot of people were doing if you can say inefficient job. In fact, there's a book that's written about it called Bullshit Jobs. And people have been doing a lot of bullshit work, but that's been their work, and they're attached to it, their identity is attached to it. So how do you see this evolving? And as a society, how do we take this impact, or I don't know if it's impact, but how do we evolve harmoniously into, or transition into, this newer phase where we are working more productively, we are more efficient, but also we are looking at the human aspect of things?
So Nandan, the funny thing about this question is that you can pick up this question and place it in 1800s, 1850, 1899, 1950, 1999, and 2020. Question still remains the same. The challenges still remain the same. It is the same evolution that has happened in the past over and over again. What we fail to realize is that over and over again, it's an elevation and abstraction of our work. Always. Our work is not going to go anywhere. Yes, the nature of the work will change, but the work will fundamentally remain in terms of doing higher and higher abstractions of this. from that perspective, this question was as meaningful when spreadsheets, Microsoft Excel came into play and you could do all these things, right? Is as meaningful today as bots take over that thing. And will be even more meaningful tomorrow when there is a lot of bots doing a lot of things, and then humans will be orchestrating the higher functions around those bots, right? There's a lot more humans, so on and so forth. So we somehow, this is the problem with that. This is ultimately comes down to the whole French notion of work, right? Work is a fixed quantity, right? Work is not a fixed quantity. Work expands, right? It expands on the basis of many things, right? And the most important thing is the technology that allows us to do more work, right? And so I'm not in the Luddite camp at all. I just fully committed to saying, free up people. There will be more to do. There is always more to do. Because there is more creative work to do. There is more finer work to do. There are things that we are not able to pay attention to today as organizations, as teams, as countries, as societies, simply because we are caught up in this drudgery and we begin to believe that it is work. Right. So there is so much bullshit work that is happening today too, right? At least have a model of that so that then you can either automate it or help people do it faster. Why would you not want a person, even if there is no bot involved, to know what is the best way of doing a certain job? When there are 10 people in that organization who are doing it a certain way, why not all, right? Why not all of them be more productive, more happy? So I see in that sense, our larger mandate is that humans should be more productive. And by being more productive, they can be more happy in these organizations. Yes, you very rightly pointed out that there will be questions on privacy and so on and so forth. And the industry will find answers to those. We are working very hard. In fact, our presence at some of the largest banks and insurance companies in the world is testimony to the fact that we have found an answer. But there will be better answers as we go along. We'll invent those better answers. So I'm very optimistic about how the world is evolving. The pandemic, in fact, has forced us also to evolve much faster.
True. And I am also in that camp that I believe that it will be net positive, and I believe there will be an abundance of opportunities. Actually, the whole irony is that if you look at from us being in the, let's say, 10 years back, we actually much more busier today than when we were, right? So actually, ironically, technology actually increases the work that we have, and we are getting more busy and busy. But that's a big irony.
Correct.
Great. So this is a great conversation, Avinash. I just wanted to, before we go, get to know from you, if people want to get started with Skan, how can they do that?
I think the easiest way to get started with Skan is go to www.skan.ai. All they want to do is put in their email address and their phone number. We will get in touch with them. We have a very simple mechanism of working with customers, getting to know our technology. We run a small pilot program. Very quick, very easy. And from our technology doesn't require any integration, any backend, complex integration or anything of that kind. So it's very easy to get started with. And I think the biggest joy for us is for the customers to say, you can do this with just watching screens. And we've had examples where customers have had the first taste of looking at their processes and then suddenly finding out, well, what is that application doing here? We sunset that application about 2 months ago. What is it? Why is it still here? So even at basic level, people are discovering about their work things that they did not know. And this is not surprising, as I said, because business systems and business intent do not have a common driving force.
Yeah, that's true. That's an important point. And finally, Avinash, if people want to connect with you, how do they connect with you?
Avinash at skan.ai, the simplest possible way. LinkedIn, they can find me. But again, the best way, as I said, is just to go on our website, leave their email. We will be more than happy to reach out and talk to them about something that we're very passionate about.
Yeah, Avinash, and thank you so much. I can see how you're building a great future by building a documentation for the telemetry of work, which I think is a huge endeavor. Good luck with that, and thank you for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you, Nandan. The word documentation, on another podcast, we will talk about whether the word documentation is correct or not. Is there a meta model of work? We'll talk about that. But yes, you are absolutely right. We are doing that work. And again, look forward to our next conversation. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for joining the Bot Nirvana podcast. Appreciate if you can leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher. Catch the show notes on botnirvana.org. While you're there, feel free to explore more automation ideas, tutorials, tools, and more. See you next time.